Alright, so welcome to this lesson where we're going to take a look at the Modal dialog box and all of the really cool effects that we can achieve with CSS. Now note that this is not just 3D transitions right here, it's also 2D transitions as well, but we're sort of mixing in both of the transitions and we're sort of making some really cool and clean effects. So what I'm going to go ahead and do is take a look at this now. So this is the Nifty model window, so a dialog box basically. Now this isn't actually built for production, however you could use it for production, but you're going to need to sort of fine tweak it here and there. But however, overall it's very simple and easy to use. I'll go through the code in just a second, but what we can do is have these really cool effects. So for example, you have fade in and scale, so they're basically 2D transitions right there. There's nothing 3D about that. But when we say, 3D rotate in left, so you get some really cool sort of 3D rotations and so forth. And the effect that I really like is slip from top. That's the one right there. And sometimes the overlay can go a little bit sort of dodgy right there, but overall it's a very cool effect. And this is the type of thing that we can, start to build a really cool website that gives you the functionality you want, but is enhancing the visual aspect of it by using 3D in the browser. So that's really cool. So what I'm going to go ahead and do is download this, which I've gone ahead and done, and it's this folder right here that's on my desktop. And then what I'm going to do is open that up. And inside of there we have this index.html file. So this is the file that we're going to be editing and taking a look at how this page is actually structured so that we can get our model dialog box to work. Then we have a JavaScript folder. Inside of there it contains all of our JavaScript files. Now what you can do is compress these down, because some of them aren't compressed, as you can see right there. So you can compress them down and then also combine them into one single file, apart from this modernizer file, because that's included in the header. All these other JavaScript files, they're included below. So what you can go ahead and do is combine them into one JavaScript file. You could even do that for Modernizer, that's absolutely fine, but just to keep things in the same structure that we have them now as we've downloaded it, I recommend making all of these right here one single JavaScript file, and the Modernizer file just leaving it as it is. So the next thing that I actually want to take a look at is the font file. So inside of there we have a font that is being linked to via the CSS. You don't have to use this font, of course you could use any font you'd like, but as of this lesson we're just going to use this font. Then in the CSS folder we have the component CSS. This is required for the model dialog box, very important, and the default CSS is just the styling for the page. So that'll basically be replaced by your CSS, of course. So what I'm going to go ahead and do is open up the index.html file inside of Dreamweaver CC. Alright, so now that we've done that, you'll be able to see we have our head tag right here, and inside of there we've got our style sheets linked, which is the default styles just for the page itself. Then we've got the component CSS for the model dialog box, and then also we have the modernizer JavaScript file linked, which is why I said leave that separate, because at the bottom of the page you have all of your other JavaScript files linked to this HTML file, and also you have a little variable down here which is polyfilter script path equals JS. So that's important for Internet Explorer, so you can just go ahead and stick that in. And so what we can go ahead and do is now take a look at the actual structure of the page. And you're probably going, well, where's all the JavaScript that's actually controlling these model dialog boxes? How do we link this up? Well, normally with a plugin from jQuery or something like that, you would actually, point to an element, say, right, when I click on this element, I want you to open up a model dialog box. This is very different in the fact that you actually have the model dialog box defined in the DOM area, and there are benefits to this. The reason being is because you actually just get to edit the DOM instead of actually fiddling around inside of JavaScript to edit the look and feel of the model dialog box and the content that goes in it. Also, it's good for search engine optimization, and you can provide fallback support if JavaScript is not available. So that is really cool, and you can go ahead and experiment and play around. But basically what we have is we have a set of divs. Now you can see we have quite a few model dialog boxes right here. So this is just one model dialog box, and you'll be able to see here we have a class that is defining, number one, that it is a model dialog box, and then also we're defining the effect. So you have effect 1, 2, and then you can keep going on 3, 4, and 5. So you have all sorts of different effects, and again we'll just go over those in just a second. Then also you have the ID, very important. So that's defining which model dialog box we actually want to target, what we want to open. And then we just have the contents of the model dialog box. So you have your header, you have your content right there, and then you also have the close button. So again, it's using a class right here, md-close, and the JavaScript is looking for that class, and when it finds that class or an element with that class that they can actually click on, such as an anchor tag, it doesn't have to be a button, and when they click close, it will close the model dialog box. So that's pretty much as easy as it gets. So you'll be able to see now you're not fiddling around with JavaScript, you're actually editing the DOM, and the JavaScript takes care of the rest. So you just say, right, I want this to be a model dialog box, I want this to have such and such an effect, and I want to give it an ID so that when I click on a button, I'm going to target that model dialog box specifically. So what I'm going to go ahead and do is take a look at this. So this says model 1, and it's the effect number 1, and I'm just going to scroll down right now. So you'll be able to see that we have a few buttons right here, and we have our div with a class of container. Now this is very important. All of the content you want to be sort of on the actual page when they load it up should be in between the opening and closing div with the class of container. So that's very, very important, because when it comes to the actual 3D effect, it needs to animate the container. So for example, it tilts backwards and then tilts forwards again, but we don't want the actual model dialog box to tilt and go backwards and forwards. We want that to push down. So I'll show you that effect again in just a second, but right now you'll be able to see we have this button, and it's got a class of MD trigger. Again, this doesn't have to be a button, you could make this an anchor if you wanted it to. And right here we're saying MD-trigger, so now the JavaScript looks at this and says, right, this is triggering a dialog box. Then we're using the data attribute, and then we're saying -model. So then what we're saying is basically whatever is the value of this attribute, data-model, is the model dialog box we want to target. So that's the ID. So you'll be able to see here it says model 1, and of course up here, which is the first model dialog box, it says ID model 1. That's very important. So I'm going to go ahead and save that right now, and then I'm going to actually preview this inside of the browser. So here we have the button right here. As I said, you could make this an anchor tag if you wanted it to, but we've got all the styling applied to this button element, so it's no big deal. I'll just leave it as a button. And also we have the class on this element that is MD-trigger, so it knows it's going to be opening up a model dialog box. And then also we have the data model attribute, which is targeting a model dialog box specifically via its ID. Very important. So once I've gone ahead and done that, I click on it, and there we go. It's that easy, and you can go ahead and edit this. You don't have to have list items in here. You could put videos, you could put any content you'd like in there. Really, really nice. And you also have some really cool effects as well, such as just me and so forth. That looks really cool. And obviously you have your 3D effects. Now these 3D effects that you have, so for example 3D flip, vertical and horizontal, they're applying the 3D transformation to the model dialog box itself. And if I click on the overlay, it'll basically get rid of the dialog box, and also you have that close button, don't forget. Now if it's applying the 3D transformation to the model dialog box itself, that's fine. You don't need to do anything extra. You just need to say do that effect, open that model dialog box via a trigger, and then that's it, job done. Now it gets a little bit more tricky, but only slightly more tricky, when you have your 3D effect right here. And what it's basically doing is it's applying the 3D transformation to the container element. So when we take a look at this now, you'll be able to see what it's doing is it's basically transforming the container rather than the actual model dialog box itself. Now, for example, you have your effect, which is slip from top, my favorite effect, which is pointing to the element with the ID of model-19. So we go up right here, we can see model-19, and it's got the effect, MD-effect-19 right there, and also it's being defined as a model dialog box. Nothing special right there, but you'll notice that on the trigger, what it's done is we've said MD-set perspective as a class, and that's going to tell JavaScript, hey, we need to actually set the perspective to the container area, because if you don't do the container area, what you're going to have is orthographic view, and that's going to look awful. So you want to make sure that you have perspective on your container element right there, so that we get that really cool folding back and folding forward and so forth and so on. And also you'll notice that we have our overlay right here. There's the end of our container, and then we have our overlay. Again, that's going to need to have perspective set on it, and so that's why we say MD-set perspective. That will set it on the container, and then it will also set it on the MD-overlay div as well. Really simple, and once that's done, just adding that very simple class, it will add that perspective view to both the container and the overlay, and then you get that really cool folding back and folding forward effect. And then it doesn't affect the actual model dialog box itself, because that we don't want to actually transform in the 3D space. We just want to move it downwards, as you saw. Easy enough. And then you have all the other effects. So you have sliding in. Again, the model dialog box is just having a basic 2D transformation right there. There's nothing special going off. But the container and the overlay, again, are getting those 3D effects. So thanks for watching this lesson, and in the next lesson, what we're going to do is take a look at Impress.js, which is an incredibly powerful JavaScript 3D presentation tool. So it's using all those CSS 3D transforms, manipulating all of that through JavaScript. But however, we don't have to write any JavaScript. All we have to do is basically use the data attribute and then define how we want stuff to move around and so forth. So it's going to be, again, working very, very closely with the DOM rather than JavaScript, which is really cool, efficient, and very, very effective. So thanks for watching this lesson, and I hope you can join me in the next one.